Tonight we are, and just a reminder that we're recording our class. Tonight in your book on one foot, we are going to look at chapter 6. When do I bow, and other questions about Jewish prayer. So I thought I'd open with a question and a little discussion about how do you feel about prayer? Do you pray? What does it mean to you to pray? Is it satisfying for you or not? Or maybe you don't do it at all, but you would like to. Who would like to share a little bit about your prayer experience?
Well, I'll dive in, Rabbi
Okay.
Thunberg. So
Thank you.
I used to pray a lot more than I do now. I think it's just a combination of being busy and age. As you get older, you only have so much energy in a day. But I do find myself just kind of talking to God throughout the day. Um, you know, Getting familiar with the Shabbat prayers and the Birchat Hamazon and some of those things. It's it's amazing, and just the thought and the intention that the sages have put there for us.
Mhm.
And it's like, no matter how many times you say it, I just kind of focus in on one part of it each time I do it. But yeah, just trying to get back more into some of the personal prayer. So
Mhm. Beautiful. So you already highlighted a couple of themes that we're going to talk about tonight. The idea of personal prayer versus fixed prayer. You mentioned Birkat Hamazon and other prayers that are part of our liturgy, part of our prescribed prayers that these wise people wrote thousands of years ago that we preserved and still say today. So that there's a place for that, and there's a place for personal prayer. So those are really important themes that we're going to dive into tonight. Thank you. Amanda and Gil, would you like to share?
Yeah, I growing up, my mom is from a Catholic background. I have never been to church. She has never taught me, but like anything about like her religion. But the one thing that I see her doing is that she prays every night before she went to bed. And when my family was going through certain, hardship, when my father was ill, she would encourage me and my sister to pray, which I would consider a very personal. I didn't follow any particular format. I don't know if I was doing the correct way. I was just finding kind of a quiet place to speak to God in my own language, which I felt that in many ways it gave me peace, and it helped to bring more strength in me. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think for me that prayer is very personal, and it's very customized to the need
Right.
for the prayer.
Excellent. So you've brought up another couple of themes that we're going to talk about tonight. One is the idea of prayer as comfort. When your dad was ill and your mom said we can pray, some people find comfort in prayer, especially during difficult times. So that's one thing. And then the idea of saying a prayer before you go to bed at night. We have that tradition in Judaism as well, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Thank you. Gil, do you want to share anything about your personal prayer experience?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that mine is a little interesting because I grew up Orthodox, and so I kind of felt like the prayer was I kind of I kind of had to pray. I mean, there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like a as much. I didn't really feel as much of the spiritual side of praying, and so I kind of resented it, when I was a child. But as I've grown older, I always go back to some of the prayers and some of the prayers that you say even like before you eat something, and I might say it, and I feel more of the spirituality in it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like a kind of like a blend for me.
Right.
But when I was young, it was definitely not my
Right.
favorite.
Absolutely. I totally understand. I work with kids. And for kids, prayer is a totally different experience than, of course, for adults, right? Because they express themselves differently. And of course, if we ask them to pray in Hebrew, which they don't really understand, even they're just learning, it's a whole different kind of experience. And so for them, it probably does feel a little bit forced. As we're adults can have the ability to, even if you don't know what the words mean, we can sometimes take that Hebrew and make it some kind of mantra, right? Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Even if you don't know what that means, you can say it, you can repeat it, it becomes a mantra, like a meditation, right? We also have the ability to appreciate prayer for what it's meant to be, even if we're not feeling it at that moment, but we might feel it at a different moment. And we can discern that for ourselves. Whereas children, if they're not feeling it today, they know they're not going to feel it the next day, right? They don't understand that they have a choice about it, right? We have a choice about prayer and how we approach it. And for adults, that can be a little easier, although there are many adults who struggle with prayer as well. So thank you for sharing your experience. David and Ava, do you have anything about your prayer experience you'd like to share?
For me, I'm probably kind of new, but yeah, because I wasn't born learning this, especially everything is new to me after I
Right.
married to David. So I started to learn little by little, but the Shema is the most impressive one. And right now, every night I will pray Shema with my kid. I mean, Hannah, and she love it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I feel it's I'm not I cannot speak Hebrew, but at least I can speak some prayers, and that made me feel connected to God
Right,
in different level. Yeah,
right.
so yeah, I like it. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Hebrew language aspect of prayer for us is an important gateway to understanding, but it's also a barrier, right?
Mhm.
I don't personally speak Hebrew hardly at all. It's just I have a real hard time with language. I can read Hebrew. I know what the words mean when I'm reading it, um, especially prayer Hebrew and some Torah Hebrew. But I was an adult learner like you all, so I have to work really hard at Hebrew to really get the intent that I want to get. So right, so it's a barrier, but it's also a gateway, because when you do get it, it opens it all up. Like when you can say your first prayer in Hebrew and know what you're saying, it takes on a whole different level. So it is
Right.
worth learning Hebrew. It is worth at least being able to read the prayer book so that you can feel like you're participating in the service.
Yeah, true.
David, how about you?
Well, I've been praying like on one foot lately because my sciatic nerve has been hurting so much. So it's like I can't like put all my weight on it. I gotta like tippy toe on it. So I
Right.
look like a wounded dog kind of. And but yeah, I've been doing in the Hebrew, 3 times a day. It's
Excellent.
important.
Right. What you're saying about the physicality of prayer is really important. I kind of laughed about, you're talking about just because your medical condition, but prayer is actually a very physical activity. We don't always think about it because we're mostly in the synagogue, we're sitting down. But there are times during the service where we're asked to stand or we're asked to bow. There's no kneeling in Hebrew, but we do stand, we do bow. We do kiss the Torah when it walks past us during that part of the service. So this physical part of the service is very powerful. It's there for a reason. We'll talk more about that later as we go. But being able to stand, being able to bow is part of it. We nowadays, it's become appropriate to say, please rise if you're able, right? Recognizing that not all people can stand for a variety of reasons. So it's a really important thing to be able to participate and to understand why we do that. So thank you for bringing up the physicality of prayer. It's also important because it's possible you could be so moved by prayer that you feel it viscerally, right? Maybe it even brings tears or some other kind of physical feeling for you. Certainly there are some prayers that are so powerful that can touch us emotionally. The mourner's Kaddish, of course, because that you're usually associating that with some person who's passed on. There's also the prayer for healing. So if you are thinking about somebody who's ill, that might, bring about some emotion. Maybe, and it happens, you're just moved by the music of the prayer. I have heard cantors sing so beautifully that it brings tears to my eyes, because they just, the way they sing it, just it sounds like angels to me when a prayer is sung so beautifully. And so there's all kinds of ways to physically respond to prayer. Of course, on Shabbat morning, when most of us pray, and in daily mornings as well, you might wrap yourself in a tallis, a prayer shawl. And that physical connection to prayer is also really powerful. When I first was learning years ago, a teacher described about what it feels like to wrap yourself in a talit and to say that prayer. And he described it as kind of wrapping the arms of God around you. I was so moved watching him do this that I ran home and grabbed my husband's talit and wrapped myself around with the arms of God and wanted to feel what that felt like. It's very powerful. So just the act of putting on a talit and preparing for prayer can be really powerful as well. In fact, so much so that warm-up prayers are part of our prayers. We actually have a section of prayer on Shabbos morning called Sukkei de Zimra that are literally designed to put us in the right prayer space, to get us in the mood for prayer, to help us open up ourselves to connect with God through our prayers. I mean, it's built into our system, which is another brilliant aspect of our prayer program, a prayer service that our rabbis developed over centuries. So prayer is a physical thing, it is an emotional thing, it's a heady thing, because prayers also have intense themes of forgiveness, themes of redemption, themes of connecting with God and being part of the universe greater than ourselves and part of our community, right? And doing, the right thing and doing what's just in the world, and a lot of, intellectual themes as well as emotional and spiritual themes as well. So there's many aspects to prayer that affect us in our whole being, which I think is what prayer is meant to do. It should impact you totally, right? So there are prayers designed for certain things. We have prayers for healing. We have prayers for food. Those are really important prayers, because if you're going to eat a piece of bread, you want to say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz, thanking God for creating this substance called bread that we eat, that nourishes us, right? And when we say it and why we say it, all of these prayers impact the way we view life and view our faith. There's a story that you're supposed to say 100 blessings a day. And a blessing is just another form of prayer, right? And the Talmud says you need to say 100 blessings a day. So I'm going to thank God for my food at least 3 times. I'm going to thank God for my body in the morning. That's 4. By the time you get through the day, you realize there's a lot of things to praise and thank God for, and a lot of prayers to say in a day. So it's very powerful because prayer elicits a sense of gratitude. Much of our prayer has to do with praising God and being grateful for all of our blessings, right? Be it food, be it community, be it life in general. And prayer is also sometimes petition. It's also asking God for help, or asking God for strength, or asking God for courage, or asking God for peace, or asking God to feed the hungry. All the things that we long for our world and for ourselves and for our families, we ask God for those things. Sometimes prayers are prayers of guilt, of apology, asking for forgiveness, right? Yom Kippur is all about, apologizing to our loved ones, to our families, but also to God for our missteps. And we misstep every day, and every day we have the opportunity to pray about that. And what does that mean to pray about that? Well, it means to gain strength, to ask for forgiveness, to correct those missteps. So prayer covers a lot of emotions. There are prayers for different times of the year, prayers for different times of day, prayers for Shabbat versus the rest of the week. Our liturgy, and liturgy is just a word for the body of prayer that we have, formal prayer. It's full, and it also teaches us a little bit about history. Our prayers were many of them written. Some of them come from Torah. Some of them were written in the Middle Ages. So whatever those people at those times who wrote those prayers were thinking about, they might have prayed about, and those prayers would have been written down. So, for example, prayers about returning to Israel or to Zion, right? That longing for our homeland is repeated throughout our prayers. And that's a communal prayer that we have. Remembrances about the temple that no longer exists. We, of course, talk about that on Tisha B'Av, which is coming up, the date on which we did lose the temple. But there are other times when we talk about rebuilding. Whether or not we really believe that we want to rebuild it or should rebuild it is another question. But our ancestors did think that. And so we continue to say those prayers as a reminder of what our ancestors have been through, right? Because our prayer service and our prayers connect us not only to God and to our current family and community, but of course to our history, right? What did our ancestors pray about? We need to know that, because we need to know where we've come from. We need to know what our history is, what they lived through. And I do often think that they often fought and died to be able to pray these prayers. There's the Holocaust, of course, most recently, but throughout history, the Jewish people have been persecuted for saying some prayers, and prayers have been misinterpreted by some. And Jews throughout history have acknowledged that and have carried those prayers forth as our right to express ourselves and express who we are as Jews. And so they're fighting for that right, and they're fighting for religious freedom carries forth for all of us. And today I'm very grateful to them that we have a synagogue today and that I can pray as I wish in my synagogue, right? Religious freedom is a hugely important value in Judaism. It is an important value in the United States, according to our First Amendment. We are all free to practice whatever religion we wish. It always harkens me back to the very first group of Jews who came to this country, and one of the group, the first synagogue was the Torah Synagogue. One of the first is in Rhode Island, and George Washington sent that congregation a letter saying, welcome to the United States, and you are free to practice your faith here in this country. And we've been standing on that promise for all these years. So our prayers hearken us to feel all of these things all at once. On the first page of our book, of our chapter 6, there's a quote here from Abraham Joshua Heschel, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, just one of our supreme teachers and maybe even a prophet of the 20th century. And he writes, prayer is our humble answer to the inconceivable surprise of living. You know, one of the things we talk about when we talk about religion in general is that religion exists to sort of answer all of the big questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? What happens after I die? What happened before me? Who is God? How does God interact with me and with people? And we try and answer those questions through prayer. We try and find answers to those questions through prayer. And the idea that just living, just being in existence is a reason to pray, right? The fact that I am standing here talking to all of you is a miracle. It's a true miracle. And I don't take that for granted. I don't take my life for granted. I don't take your life or your time for granted. And I'm grateful to God for this opportunity. Prayer helps us think about those big questions. Okay, so any questions so far? You guys know you can always interrupt me with a question. All right, on page 82, prayer mode number 1, keva. There is a story told by Rabbi Israel Friedman about a small Jewish town. It was far off from the main roads of the land, but it had all the necessary municipal institutions, a mikveh, a cemetery, a hostel, and a law court, as well as all sorts of craftsmen, tailors, shoemakers, carpenters, and masons. One trade was missing, however, or one trade was lacking. There was no watchmaker. Over the course of years, many of the clocks became so annoyingly inaccurate that their owners just decided to let them run down and ignore them altogether. There were others, however, who maintained that as long as the clocks ran, they should not be abandoned. So they wound their clocks day after day, though they knew that they were not accurate. One day, the news spread through the town that a watchmaker had arrived, and everyone rushed to him with their clocks. But the only ones he could repair were those that had been kept running. The abandoned clocks had grown too rusty. So this is again by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and we're trying to determine exactly what is keva prayer from this text. So the questions on page 83, from this text, what words would you use to describe keva prayer? What is the value of keva prayer? What are the challenges? And how do you personally relate to the concept of keva prayer? So I'm wondering, just from this story, based on these clocks that were kept running and that were able to be repaired and keep running, if that gives you a sense of what it possibly means for keva prayer. Anyone have any idea what that might mean?
Rabbi Thunberg, it sounds like it's more the discipline, but not necessarily the perfection.
Excellent. That's a good way of looking at it. Amanda, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say it sounds like it's something that's done every day, or at least routinely or
Excellent.
repetitively, and maybe have a similar structure.
Very good.
Both of you are correct. Keva means.
Rabbi Thunberg, I'm sorry, I can't hear what Amanda said.
Oh, so Amanda, will you want to say it again? Amanda said, or maybe Amanda, turn up your volume or get a little closer. She talked about the idea that it has to happen every day. It has a routine to it, like the clocks, have to run every day, right? And that's true. Keva technically means fixed prayer. So this is the prayer, for example, that we find in our prayer books. The order of prayers as we find it in our prayer books is keva. The Hebrew language that we know that we find it in is keva. The fact that we're supposed to say the same prayers every day, 3 times a day, that's keva. So you're right to describe them as, excuse me 1 second, I need to drink water. You're right to describe them as routine, as fixed, as written down, as prescribed. Esther, can you remind me again how you described it?
I said a discipline.
Yes, exactly. There is a discipline to it. Not everybody does it 3 times a day, or maybe you only do it in the mornings or whatever. But the fact that you do it every day and that you're disciplined about it, that's keva. So what is the value of keva prayer? Well, the value is that if it's keva for me, it's also keva for you, right? All Jews have the same prayers, right? Even if you're Reform or Orthodox or conservative, you still always will have the Baruch Hu, the Shema, the Amidah, the Aleinu, in that order all the time, no matter what, right? And it's in your prayer book. And so the value is that I can go into any synagogue anywhere and follow along and participate. What else do you think is the value of Keva prayer?
Spiritual things are kind of ethereal, whereas if you translate it into the physical realm, it allows for that connection.
Excellent.
And so even though you may not always feel the connection, there's the opportunity for it.
Absolutely. Because if you were left to your own devices, oh, I'll pray when I feel spiritual, that may not happen every day, right? So by being disciplined about it, you may actually find that that happens more often than it would have otherwise, right? And saying those same words over and over again, on one hand, what one challenge is, well, that just becomes rote and memorized, and so therefore it might lose its meaning. But the advantage is, at the same time, I mean, I know that there are many prayers that I can do by heart. And sometimes those are the times I actually get into it even more, because I can just close my eyes and just say the words and get into that moment. I don't have to worry about reading it or whatever. Although there's advantages to reading a prayer as well. When you have those words in front of you and you're following along, when I lead a service and I'm really intent on making sure I get it right and I'm following along, I actually find that to be a very spiritual experience for me, because I immerse myself on the page. Like, I'm so focused on saying the right words that I actually get even deeper into that. So both things can happen, whether you memorize it or whether you read the prayers. Of course, one of the challenges is you might not be able to read the prayers, right? If your Hebrew's not great, you won't be able to read the prayers. And so while everybody else is sort of seeming to know what's going on, you might feel a little lost. So, and that comes with time and practice. The other advantage is you can close your eyes and just listen. And listening, especially because it's all chanted or sung, just listening to the music can transport you, even if you don't know the Hebrew words exactly. So the question is, how do you personally relate to the concept of Keva prayer? And I don't know if you have an answer for this at this point, having kind of just begun this journey. Maybe David can share with us, since he immerses himself in that. David, do you want to talk about your personal relationship to fixed prayer?
Yeah, so I mostly try to pray about 3 times a day, but there are some days that are hectic, and then I'll, resort to 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll just make the last one maybe like a little bit more beefier.
Right.
And it's a good way for me to start remembering, because I'll find myself like reading up, like faster than, I start to memorize it,
Right.
So I'm like, there is value. Like, I mean, I wouldn't recommend to just, pray without feeling, but I mean, even if you don't feel like praying, there's value that you're getting used to the words of Hashem. So it's like, it's like they're engraving themselves in my mind.
Right. Absolutely. Sometimes it's when you least feel like doing it is when you should do it. Kind of like going to the gym, right? You know how it is, you don't want to go work out, but you push yourself to work out, and then you're glad you worked out, right? The same is true with going to synagogue and praying. Sometimes you're not in the mood. You're just tired. You just don't want to deal with it. But then you go and you get into it, and then you're glad that you did it. I mean, it's a unique analogy, perhaps, but it's worth taking the time for, right? Some people do not like this idea. Some people prefer what we're going to find on the next page. Kavanah, page 84. So I'm going to read this little story for you. There was a young shepherd who was unable to recite the Hebrew prayers. The only way in which he worshiped was, Master of the world, you well know that if you had sheep and gave them to me to tend, though I take wages for tending from all others, from you I would take nothing because I love you. And one day a learned man passing by heard the shepherd pronounce his offer and shouted at him, Fool, do not pray that way. And so the shepherd asked him, well, then how then should I pray? So the learned man taught him all the blessings in order, the recitation of the Shema and the Amidah, so that from that point forward, the shepherd would not pray the way he used to. But after the learned man left, the shepherd forgot all that he had been taught and could not pray. And he was even afraid to say what he had been accustomed to saying, because the learned man had told him not to. One night, the learned man had a dream, and in it he heard a voice. If you do not tell the shepherd to say what he was accustomed to saying before you came to him, know that misfortune will overtake you, for you have robbed me of one of my most precious blessings. And at once the learned man went to the shepherd and said to him, What prayer are you now making? And the shepherd answered, None, for I have forgotten what you have taught me, and you forbade me to say, if you had sheep. Then the learned man told him what he had dreamed and said, Please say what you used to say. Behold, here is a person who had neither great learning nor eloquent words. He only had it in his heart to do good, and this was esteemed in heaven. The compassionate one desires the heart. From Sanhedrin. So this is from Rabbi Yehuda HaHasid from the 12th century. So from this text, what words would you use to describe Kavanah prayer? Is it fixed? Oh, Amanda?
Is that more like
Yeah.
well, kind of like praying in whatever style you want, right?
Absolutely. Style is part of it.
It's very personal.
It's very personal,
Yeah.
No, there's
Right?
no certain format.
there's no format.
And it could be any time in a way.
In a way, yeah, right? So the word kavanah also means intention. So, but what the reference here is your personal intention for prayer. This boy, this shepherd, he wanted to worship God, and the only way he could was to give him this idea, to send up this idea that I would do anything for you, God. I would even tend your sheep for free, right? Letting God know that he is his God's servant. There's another version of this about a boy who did not know the words, but he played the flute, and he would play the flute all day, and that was his way of praying to God. And then when he came into the synagogue, he brought his flute in to pray, but they told him, you can't do that in the synagogue. But then he was so frustrated because he couldn't pray the way he wanted to pray that finally God said, yes, I want to hear your flute even in the synagogue. And the boy played. There's another version of the story which tells you that this is a very important idea in Judaism, of a person who didn't know Hebrew. They only knew how to recite the Aleph Bet. Aleph Bet, Gimel, Daled, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, right? The whole Hebrew alphabet. So instead of praying, he would recite the Hebrew alphabet, thinking that God knew the words and knew what his kavanah was, knew what his intention was, and God would take his letters that he gave him and put them in the right order. That was his way of praying. So the idea of kavanah prayer is prayer that this is yours. This is from your heart in whatever language, format, time of day, all day, in your car while driving kind of prayer, right? Kavanah prayer can also occur during fixed prayer time. So sometimes when you're in synagogue and you have the prayer book open, sometimes my mind wanders and I think about other things, or I think about God in some other way, or I start to have a conversation with God in my own way. I hear the prayers going on around me, but maybe I'm having a different conversation with God. That can happen as well. So Kavanah prayer is very personal, and it's very much what you bring to it. And so that's why it's valuable. It's also that covenant prayer is valuable because it doesn't require Hebrew, it doesn't require any skill per se, right? The challenges to covenant are what? You may not ever feel like doing it, right? Like the got people who didn't maintain their clock tower, their watches, and let them just run out. They never had the kavanah to keep it going, and so they just stopped. Or, this boy who wants to pray so desperately, but feels like if he doesn't do it a certain way, he can't do it at all, right? That's a challenge. We want everyone to know that you can pray in whatever way that you want. So how do you personally relate to the concept of kavanah prayer? I pray every day in some form or another. I do more kavanah prayer than fixed keva prayer, I will admit to you, because I need to put it in English for myself. I need to say the words. Sometimes I say the translations. Sometimes I just say my own words. Sometimes I literally close my eyes. Because I work here in the synagogue, I will sometimes walk into the sanctuary and just stand in front of the ark and close my eyes and have a conversation. I did this yesterday. It was my first day back from vacation, first day back in the office, in the building for a long time. And I went and offered a prayer of gratitude in the sanctuary. One of the perks of the job to be able to do that, right? But those prayers are so important, and it made me feel like, I'm back in this spiritual place. I mean, one of the reasons I went into this line of work was because I wanted to do spiritual work, right? So I kind of enveloped myself in it in that way. So kavanah prayer is very important and special, and we're going to actually do a little bit of it in a little bit. So now look at page 86. So keva, the fixed prayer, the structure of prayer. So the basic service, and this is true basically every morning, right? You have your warm-up, the Pasukei de Zimra prayers, blessings and psalms that help us enter into prayer, blessings that kind of get us in the mood for prayer. Then you have the Shema Uvracha, the Shema and her blessings. The Baruch Hu is the call to order. This is the formal call, the one that we say it's a call and response. So the prayer leader will say, Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvarach, and the people will respond, Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed, right? To say, hey, everybody, it's time to pray. And the people say, yes, it's time to pray, and praise God. There's that interaction. And then we go into, if it's an evening prayer, at the Mariv Aravim, the creation, the evening prayers for creation, or the Yotzer Or, the morning prayers. Same with the prayers for revelation. Ahavat Olam is said in the evening. Ahava Rabbah is said in the morning. And then we go to the Shema, which we've said already once tonight, and we'll say it again. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Now, I didn't even think about it. I just closed my eyes as I said that. In prayer, in services, we cover our eyes. So the idea of covering your eyes or closing your eyes during the Shema is really, it's a way of taking this fixed prayer and making it a kavanah prayer, which is really fascinating to bring those two together. By closing your eyes during this chant, it makes it more of your own self, right? This is a prayer that, yes, you're saying it in community, but it's within your own heart, and you are bringing your own kavanah to that prayer, your intention. Following the Shema, you have the V'ahavta, which isn't listed here because the V'ahavta, which immediately follows Shema, is not really considered a prayer per se. It is a piece of Torah that we recite at this point. Then you have the Michamocha, which also is a piece of Torah, but it's listed here as a prayer. Hashkivenu in the evening, a prayer for peace. And then we have the Amida. Now the Amida is the central prayer. It's also called Ha-Tefillah, which means the prayer, like the prayer. This is the prayer that all of the other prayers are sort of leading up to. It is the central part of the service. Amida, the word Amidah means standing. hence our standing audience with God. This is the point of the service where we rise and we recite the whole Amida standing. So the Amida is said in a variety of ways. In the evening, it's said completely silently, which is, again, in my view, a way of combining the keva and the kavana. Because you're saying it quietly to yourself, you're saying the fixed words, or maybe you're not. Maybe you're reading the English translation, or maybe you're closing your eyes and just thinking about it. But that is your opportunity to have a private conversation with God. It is your kavanah, what you bring to it. In the morning, especially on Shabbos morning, we do it partly aloud and partly silently. We repeat it. Hazarat Hashatz is the repetition of the Amidah. And then we'll do it again at Musaf, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the repetition on Shabbos morning. So we recite the Amidah many times throughout the day. There's many themes. I could do a whole class just on that prayer alone. We'll come back to that another time. If it's a Shabbat morning or a Monday morning, a Thursday morning, you would also have a Torah reading service. In the conservative synagogue, there's a triennial reading. You read, there's 52 readings a year, or actually 54. Some of them get combined. We read a third of it every year so that we do a cycle. If you're in an Orthodox synagogue, they would do the whole reading in one morning. It makes it a little longer. And then you would have the conclusion, the concluding service, the concluding prayers, the Aleinu, the closing prayer of gratitude for being Jewish. And then we always end with a Kaddish, the Kaddish Yatom, the prayer normally recited in memory of the deceased. Now, this is the basic outline. There are many other prayers that are not listed here. For example, after the Amida and before the Torah reading, there's something called a Hatzi Kaddish, which is half a Kaddish. It's like a short prayer that basically serves its sole purpose, aside from praising God with its language, is to separate one part of the service from the other. At the end of the Torah reading, you have a different Kaddish that you say, the Kaddish Shalem, which is a more complete Kaddish, and Shalem meaning whole or complete. You do that Kaddish after the Torah reading. So there's different points of the service and more specific prayers we can get into at some point. So that's the basic service. And again, I want to add that this is the basic service, whether you are at the Reform, Reconstructionist, the Conservative, the Orthodox, they all follow this basic formula, all of them. Now, times for prayer, you have Ma'ariv, which means evening. You have Shacharit, which means morning, and you have Mincha, which means afternoon. So remember, they're listed in this way for a reason. According to the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, God created the first day, and then it says there was evening and there was morning, a first day. So consequently, a Jewish day begins at sundown, right? So Mariv would be the first prayers of that day, the evening prayers. Then we wake up in the morning and we say Shachri, then we say Mincha, and then when it's Mariv again, it's technically the next day, right? On Shabbat, you have Kabbalat Shabbat, which is our Friday night, right? Kabbalat Shabbat is a group of psalms that we sing that are joyful, that welcome in the Sabbath. They're kind of like the warm-up prayers for Shabbat. And then you have a Mariv service for Shabbat. And the Shabbat services differ. We do have some additional readings on Shabbat that we don't have during the week. Then again, in the morning, after Shachrit on Shabbat morning and holiday mornings, there's this additional set of prayers called Musaf. Musaf actually means additional. These prayers are here historically to remind us of the sacrifice system that no longer exists, because this was the time that people would bring their sacrifices to the temple, right? Their gift offering, their tithing. We still talk about tithing a little bit, but we don't use that word so much in Judaism. We certainly pay membership dues and we give to the synagogue in donations, but the Musaf is specifically taking us back to that history. And the conservative movement and the Orthodox movement have retained this part of the service. The Reform movement does no longer do Musaf service. And then there's Havdalah. Havdalah is done in the evening at sundown on Saturday to mark the end of Shabbat. And of course, also on Kabbalat Shabbat, you have the candle lighting, the challah, and the wine, the bringing in Shabbat with your Shabbat dinner. Questions? Okay. So now let's look at synagogue geography. I think all of you have been in a synagogue, but just to go over some terms. And why is this here? Because the kava prayer, for the most part, is done in a synagogue, right? A traditional synagogue will have a minyan, a prayer group, every morning, so that people who want to pray every morning can go to the synagogue and do that. Unfortunately, we do not have a prayer minyan every day, so those people who want kava prayer, those fixed prayers every morning, do them at home. But if we do, and especially for Shabbat, this is what you can expect to see at the synagogue. So the first thing you'll notice, I'm starting on the left and going across, is the bima. The bima is the kind of platform or the stage where the rabbi stands and the cantor, etc. Now, the way that they have it shown here, which is pretty much very similar to the way we have it here in our synagogue, is kind of modern. In a traditional synagogue, you might see the Aron HaKodesh, the ark with the Torahs in it, up at the front, but the rabbi might actually stand in the center amongst the people, and they may actually read Torah at a big table, like from the middle of the room. I mean, you can go into Google and look at pictures of old synagogues and see what I mean. And even today, there are many Orthodox synagogues that are still set up that way. We've in America, we've kind of gotten into this sort of stage idea that, you know, which is unfortunate, because the prayer service is not meant to be a performance. This isn't about the rabbi or the cantor's performance. They're just guides. They're just prayer leaders guiding all of us in prayer. In fact, our rabbi doesn't even sit on the bima a lot of the time. He sits down in the front row listening to the cantor when the cantor's leading prayers, right? The only time the rabbi gets up on the bima is when he's giving his sermon, for example, or participating in some way. So different synagogues set up their spaces in different ways. Ikar up in LA definitely does a whole big circle with the bima, with the table for the Torah right in the middle. So it's kind of like synagogue in the round. So this is not prescribed. Not all synagogues have to be set up in this particular way. All right, so you have the bima, which is the platform at the front or wherever the Torah is going to be read from. You have the cantor and the rabbi, and of course in this picture they have the rabbi in the middle and the cantor off to the side. In our synagogue, they're both up on two sides. There's nothing in the middle. And it doesn't matter what side they're on. Our rabbi is on the left and our cantor is on the right. It doesn't matter. The Aron HaKodesh, that word, by the way, means holy ark. This is that center structure that holds all of the Sefer Torahs, the Torah scroll. Up above that is the Ner Tamid, which means eternal light. This Ner Tamid should always be burning. Either there's some kind of an electric light that's always on. Of course, in the ancient temple, it would have been an oil lamp that was always maintained. Some synagogues today are using solar power to maintain that light at all times, but it should always be lit. We have a Ner Tamid and an ark in our second building, and even though we don't use it on a regular basis, that light's always on. You have the Torah scrolls, the rabbi. By the way, I should say that not every synagogue has a cantor. We do, Cantor Amy, currently. But we also have a lot of lay leaders who also lead singing or davening, as it's called. To daven, as it says down below, is to pray. It's actually a Yiddish word, but we use it regularly here. Who's leading the davening, right? Which is kind of an Anglicizing of the Yiddish word. And daveners, those who daven. So we have lay leaders who can also daven. Hal Hurwitz, who you may have seen in our recordings, is a lay leader who davens beautifully, and he's a beautiful prayer leader. Shliach Zibor is another way of saying prayer leader. They don't have that term here. And then in the front, there's a talit rack, and we have one of those too. so that those who don't have their own or need to borrow one can borrow one. Most people own their own, and it's nice to have your own. Talit, the prayer shawls are very meaningful. They can be. I have several, and all the ones I have some kind of special meaning to me. One of them I bought in Israel when I was ordained. One of them is white for high holy days. One of them I bought when I went through a life cycle transition. So sometimes a talit or any ritual item can be used to mark a special event in one's personal life, right? And it's kind of a mark of kavanah. You have the sidurim. Now our sidurim are in the pews, in the backs of the chairs, but some people have them out on tables. And a sidur is a prayer book, right? A sidur. The word sidur, they have it here, is listed as the prayer book, which it is. But the word sidur actually comes from the root Hebrew word of seder, which means order, right? And you also know the word seder from the Passover Seder, right? It's the same word. Sidur, seder means order. Why? Because these prayers are in the same order every time, all the time. The order, the prayer order never changes. So this is called Sidur Lev Shalem, the prayer book of the heart, the complete heart, the complete prayers of the heart. There's numerous ways to translate that. So Sidur is prayer book. So down below you have kippah or yarmulke, right? The head covering. Yarmulke, by the way, is Yiddish. Kippah is Hebrew. Talit and tzitzit. So the talit is the prayer shawl. That tzitzit, as a matter of fact, I actually have some here. Well, they're in packages. The tzitzit are the strings. These haven't been tied yet. That are the little knots, then the strings that hang off the edge of the tzitzit, at the edge of the talit, and they are symbolic of the 613 mitzvot. That has to do with the number of times that it's wrapped and tied into knots. There's actually, I know how to do that. I've taught kids how to wrap their own tzitzit for their talit, maybe for their bat mitzvah. I did that with my daughter for her talit, for her bat mitzvah. It's a really fun ritual to do. There's tefillin. Tefillin are the leather boxes and straps. These are worn only on weekdays. These are the boxes that you've seen on people's heads, and then there's one on the arm, and then it's wrapped all around. These are very old tradition for tefillin. It is a Torah tradition. It's actually inscribed in the Torah to wear the Shema between our eyes, right? It's a symbol before our eyes. It used to be, of course, only for men. Women are also now wrapping tefillin. Tefillin is only worn in the morning prayers during the week. They are not worn on Shabbat. Talit is only worn in the morning and never in the evening, except on Erev Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre. Then we wear our talit in the evening. You know this word already, I think. Minyan, a quorum of 10 adult Jews needed to pray. The main reason for this, there are a couple of prayers that require a minyan. The Baruch Hu, because it's an obvious communal prayer. I'm calling out to begin prayer and you're responding to me, so I need to have people there to respond, right? So 10 people are required. And also to say the mourner's Kaddish, you need to have 10 people. So this is important because the point of that is to say that a person shouldn't be mourning alone, right? You can say it alone in your home or whatever, but better in community, better to mourn in the comfort of your community. And if you are in a service and you don't have 10 people, you don't say it. And that's unfortunate because if there's someone there who needs to say it, they need to have a 10th person. To daven is to pray. Aliyah, the honor of going up to the Torah to bless a portion of the reading. So traditionally on a Shabbat morning, there are 7 aliyot, seven readings. And for each one, there is a reader and there are the people who are being called up for the aliyah. So they are people from the congregation. They might be called up because it's some special occasion, like someone's birthday, or maybe they're doing it in honor of someone who passed away, maybe at the yard site of someone who passed away. Maybe they're celebrating an anniversary. maybe for no reason whatsoever, just that they're there and they want to participate. Lots of reasons a person, if they would have an aliyah, a special one if they're becoming bar or bat mitzvah, because the first time they do that, that is their official moment of becoming bar or bat mitzvah. So that's a special one. People do baby namings and they'll come up for an aliyah with their baby to have their baby named. So there's lots of ways of giving out an honor and having an aliyah to bless the Torah. Chagba and Galila are the honor of lifting the Torah scroll and dressing the Torah scroll. So after the readings are finished, the Gabbai Rishon, the person who is leading that particular part of the service, the Torah service will will call up, there's a special Hebrew call, Yamdu, Chagba, Galila, something like that. And then the person will come up and literally take the scroll and hold it up, and they'll turn like this, and so that the audience can see the words of the Torah scroll. And you're supposed to see 3 columns of Torah writing to show that this is what we just read from. And everybody will stand during this point. By the way, we stand when the Torah is taken out of the ark, and we stand when it's lifted. And then that person will sit down with the Torah scroll, and the person who's doing Galila will take the cover and put the cover back on and help scroll it back up again. So these are all honors. So the reason this is important is, again, this is a communal participatory service. It does not have to be the rabbi and the cantor who do everything. We have our rabbi who may give the Devar Torah, our cantor who leads the davening, but we usually have a congregant who serves as Gabbai Rishon, leading the Torah service. We also have someone called a Gabbai Sheni. Those 2 people help the Torah reader, making sure they get all the Torah readings right. Because remember, in a Torah scroll, there are no vowels. So the important thing is that it's read correctly. So sometimes the Torah reader will make a mistake, and the Gabbais will help correct that. But anybody can read and anybody can have an aliyah. So that's part of participating. If you come this Saturday, and I hope that you will, I'm reading Torah this Saturday. I'm so excited. Here's my Torah portion that I'm learning, and I have this copy. Can you see that? And it has bells and marks. But I'm learning this page, which you see has no bells and no marks. So it's something I have to memorize and prepare for all week. So that's part of my kavanah. So reading from Torah is such an honor and a thrill. And the first time you do it, you're so nervous, you're shaking, and I still do get nervous sometimes because it's a big deal to read Torah, and I think it's an honor to do it. All right, any questions about any of that, about keva or synagogue geography? Okay. Where we are, 8:03. Okay. So this is a lovely article about kavanah by Rabbi Naomi Levy. Naomi Levy is a rabbi up in LA. She has a congregation called Nakshuba that she started herself, and she is a prolific writer of prayer. And she tells us in this article that she started writing prayers when she was pregnant. She wanted to use that as a way of dealing with her pregnancy and praying for the health of her child. And it became cathartic for her. And so she started to encourage people, as it says in the bottom paragraph on page 88, some people are shocked when I encourage them to supplement their traditional prayers with personal, spontaneous ones. They assume that making any change to the prayer service is forbidden, but they are mistaken. Composing personal prayers is not a sin, it's a blessing. It is a way to restore our communication with God. Where do you think all the prayers in the prayer book came from? They weren't written in heaven. They were created by human beings who were filled with awe and who wanted to share their thoughts and feelings with God. Religious expression is not some relic from the past. We should never hesitate to give voice to our souls. And then I'm going to keep reading. This part's really special. Pray for me, Rabbi, is probably the most common request I hear from those who come to see me. My response is always, of course I will, but I need your help. and I encourage the person seated before me to tell me what he or she wants me to say to God. Inevitably, the most heartfelt and beautiful words of prayer issue forth from the very mouth that had previously been unable to pray. Stunned and proud, the individual returns to the world blessed with the gift of personal prayer. It is remarkable to see what can emerge from us when we stop trying to pray to God and start talking to God instead. Too often, we envision prayer as something saintly and proper, something that has strict rules and standards. We get intimidated and inhibited. But talking to God is a very natural and intimate experience. We can talk to God anywhere, in the shower, in the car, at work, and in bed. We don't need to sound smart or polished. We don't need to ask anyone else to do it for us. So in response to that, Rabbi Spitz on page 89 offers this experience. And he's done this with our students here at CBI in our religious school and our Hebrew High in lots of different ways. This innovative exercise in Kavanah comes from Rabbi Eli Spitz, a noted teacher of Jewish spirituality and meditation. It is based on the practice dating back to the 18th century of placing a kavittel, or a little note, in between the stones of the Western Wall in Jerusalem. So what he's asking here is for you to write a letter to God. Use this space or another paper if you want to keep it private. Don't worry about what you believe or don't believe. You can address it to God, the universe, or to whom it may concern. And then the follow-up is to answer your letter as if God were writing back to you. And again, don't judge what you write, rather let your words flow spontaneously and allow yourself to be surprised. We're not going to do this tonight, but I do encourage you to do this on your own. You don't have to do it on this page or whatever. You can do it anywhere you want, or journal or whatever. But it is an absolutely beautiful activity, and it's one that you can do anytime, right? Don't make this a one-shot deal, right? Do it again and again. Do it every Shabbat. Do it to celebrate an anniversary. Do it on your birthday, right? Do it, whenever, and do it with the intent of just talking to God. And in doing so, you will have a spontaneous Kavanah prayer experience. And writing it down just kind of gets you in the practice of doing it. You can do it like Rabbi Levi says, in the shower, in the car, whenever it is. But if you feel like you're having trouble praying, or if you feel like you are struggling to communicate with God, that's an activity and an exercise that you can try. Okay, page 90. So brachot. Brachot, the word means blessings. The practice of saying brachot is a way of joining together keva and kavanah, a ritual response that is spontaneously offered in a moment of true gratitude for a tasty meal, a beautiful sight, a piece of good news, or for reaching a time of celebration. All brachot begin with the same 6-word formula. So say it aloud with me while I say it too. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. And this means, blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe. And then under that, it says brachot that precede a performing of a mitzvah, such as lighting Shabbat candles, sitting in a sukkah, affixing a mezuzah, etc., continue on with the following 4 words. And say this aloud with me too. Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, which means, who makes us holy through your mitzvot, commanding us to, and then you say what the mitzvah is. So let's practice that. So let's look at the last one on page 91, before engaging in the study of Torah. So the mitzvah that we're being commanded to do is to study Torah. So we start with the first 2 parts of the blessing, and say it with me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, and here's the mitzvah, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praised are you, or blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who makes us holy through your mitzvot, commanding us to busy ourselves in the study of Torah. So that's the whole bracha using both parts. If you look at the top, you'll see a bracha using just the first 6 words. So upon doing something for the first time or celebrating a milestone, at the top of page 91, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who has kept us alive and sustained us and allowed us to reach this joyful moment. This is a very special prayer. We say it at every milestone event, a baby naming, a bar mitzvah, a wedding. You could say it at a birthday. You can say it when you buy a new car, something you've never done before, your first time on an airplane, any number of things, right? It's an all-encompassing kind of blessing. I think we said it the first time we had services back in the building after being out for COVID. I will say it with my students on the first day of religious school in the fall. We'll say it on Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the new year. We say it on Passover, the first day of Passover, first day of Sukkot. We say it the first night of Hanukkah, right? All the firsts of the year. So the next one, on page 91, upon seeing the wonders of nature, such as a sunrise, lightning, shooting star, or a beautiful vista, you would say, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, oseh ma'aseh v'reishit. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who continues the work of creation. Sometimes my husband and I will take Shabbat walks or hikes, and I say this numerous times. Every time I see a beautiful wildflower or the view, or ever we're hiking or whatever, Oseh ma'aseh v'reishit. The work of creation is just so magical. Upon seeing a rainbow, we say, a rainbow has a special blessing all its own, and we'll talk about why. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zocher habrit ve'ne'eman bivrito ve'kayam be'ema amaro. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who remembers the covenant and your promises. Specifically with the rainbow, you can imagine that the covenant, the promise we're talking about here is the one God gave to Noah after the flood, right? God floods the world and destroys it. But then afterwards, God says to Noah, I promise I won't flood the world again. And the rainbow is the sign of that covenant. So when we see a rainbow, that's the prayer that we say, and that's the covenant we remember. Upon hearing good news, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hatov v'hametiv. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who is good and does goodness. So what kind of good news? Maybe someone recovered from an illness. Maybe, although you could also say Birkat HaGomel for that. Birkat HaGomel is the prayer that you say if you've survived something that might have been life-threatening. It could be a surgery or whatever, but you could also say this. You could say this blessing when someone graduates, although you could also say Shehechianu for that. Someone gets a promotion, also could be a Shehechianu moment. So there's some crossover with that, but any good news. And upon hearing bad news, including of a death, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha'emet. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who judges truth. Some people, when they hear that someone dies, just say Dayan ha'emet. In fact, you even see on Facebook, if someone writes about a death, people will write in the comments, DHE. Like they'll just put DHE and everyone knows what it means. Dayan ha'emet, judger, the one who judges in truth. Okay. Upon affixing a mezuzah to a doorpost, so Amanda and Gil, when you move into your new home, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, lik bo'ah mezuzah. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who makes us holy through your mitzvot, commanding us to affix a mezuzah. So of course, it's tradition to place a mezuzah on the right side of your doorpost, leaning in towards the house. And it has a little shin on it for the Shema, and inside is the cloth, the piece of parchment that has the Shema and the V'ahavta on it. When you attach it to your house, you'll recite this blessing. And if you attach any mezuzot to any of your other walls, any of your other doorways in your house, and you can do your kitchen, you can do your bedroom, the den, the living room, any room except the bathroom, you would say this blessing. Questions? We already talked in the beginning about saying a prayer at bedtime, and some of you do that at night. So here are two prayers, one when you lie down and one when you rise up. On page 92, beginning and ending our day with the briefest moment of pause and gratitude transforms the rest of the day. Below are the first words we utter in the morning and the last before we go to sleep. So Moda'ani, and there's a version for men and a version for women. The only difference here is the first word. Men say modeh, women say moda. So I would say Moda'ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shehechazarta bi nishmati b'chemla rabba emunatecha. I am grateful before you, Eternal One, for restoring my soul to me. Great is your faithfulness. So the idea upon saying this when you wake up in the morning is there's an ancient idea that perhaps when we're sleeping, our soul leaves our bodies and goes to visit God or whatever our souls do at night, but then they come back to us and we thank God for restoring our soul to us, and we begin our day with that sense of gratitude. And then the bedtime Shema, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Bi'ado afkid ruchi be'et tishan v'ha'ira. Ve'im ruchi geviati, Adonai li v'lo ira. I place my spirit in your care, Adonai. When I wake and when I sleep, God is with me. I have no fear. It is true that people often fear sleep, especially children. So the idea behind this prayer is to calm them, to calm ourselves, to put us in a state of gratitude again, because God is with me and God will protect me, and that there's no reason for us to fear going to sleep. So getting in the habit just to start your day with that blessing and to end your day with that blessing is a very beautiful way to start your day. And it definitely, saying the Shema at night with kids is really powerful. When my daughter was little, we did it every night as well. It's also a good habit just to talk to your kids, just a little Jewish parenting advice. Just as with adults, adults who are stressed and who have trouble going to sleep at night, it's good practice to keep a gratitude journal by the bed and to say what 3 things good happened today. Today I had a good day. I got a lot of work done. I taught this class, and I had lunch with a friend, and we haven't had to been able to do that for a while, right? So when I get into bed tonight and I think about those good things that happened today, I can take a deep breath and go to sleep. When my daughter was very little, maybe 4 or 5, maybe 5 or 6, because she was in school, and she was upset about something that happened at school that day. I don't remember what it is, and it was, in our minds it was probably nothing, but for a little one it was a big deal. So I had her say to me, people tell me what good things happened today. And you know what? She did it and she fell right to sleep. Like, it really calmed her down. And I think it's a really important tool that, we just assume that kids can't take on those kind of abstract ideas of gratitude, but they can. And I highly suggest it. And it's a great way to ground your kids. Okay, and yourself and your spouse. Page 93, 10 ways to build a spiritual practice. So years ago, we never heard the term spiritual practice. Now it's kind of common terminology to talk about your daily spiritual practice or your prayer practice. Because the truth is, like one of you said earlier, it's not about perfection. It's about just the act of doing, right? God doesn't expect perfection, but you have to practice it in order to not get good at it, but to get to a point where it feels productive for you, where you feel like you are understanding what you're doing. when you first start praying, especially Jewish prayer in Hebrew, if you're not familiar with it, it sounds just foreign. And it takes time. And this was true for me. Like, I had some minimal experience growing up with Jewish prayer, but not much. My parents didn't join a synagogue till I was in my late teens. So I really was an adult learner. And even later, when it came to really fixed prayer, like we do here at CBI, and so when I first started learning, I felt just like that. I was like, how does anyone get to understand all this and learn all this? Well, it's taken me a long time. It takes years of practice. It doesn't have to. There were moments, even when I didn't feel like I understood what was being said, that I still got in the mode. And music is an important part of that. If the synagogue has good music and good davening, good prayers, it helps a lot. And the music can transport you. We have Amy here. She has got a beautiful voice. My old synagogue where I grew up, they actually had a choir, which is unusual in some Jewish synagogues. Some synagogues only have them for high holy days, but our particular synagogue had an amazing choir all year round. So I could hear them on Friday nights as well as high holy days. And my mother and my aunt sang in the choir, so that gave us a little bit more connection. But their music was beautiful. And so I learned a lot of the Hebrew words by listening to the music. And by the way, I highly suggest that you can take a trip over to Golden Dreidel, the Judaica shop here in Tustin, and pick out some CDs, pick out some Debbie Friedman, some Sam Glazer. There's some other Jewish songwriters who have transformed Jewish prayer by setting it to kind of more modern sounding music. And that helps you learn the Hebrew. And so I learned a lot of Hebrew by listening to those musicians and going to those concerts and listening to them. And it helped a lot. And I have associations with some of those prayers because of it. So here's 10 ways to build a spiritual practice. 1, acknowledge moments of gratitude. Count your blessings, pause and appreciate, breathe, you are blessed. Remind yourself of this every single day, 3 times a day or more. Explore synagogues in your area. If you don't yet have a spiritual home, go visit several different synagogues and see where you feel most comfortable. Sometimes it takes a few tries, but when it clicks, it can change your life. So again, find the one that speaks to you, whether it be the way they pray, the music, maybe it's the rabbi inspires you, whatever. But I do encourage you to pick a synagogue, not necessarily for the rabbi, because rabbis come and go, but the nature of the service is pretty similar. Recite the bedtime Shema. Saying our 6-word declaration of faith before closing your eyes for the night means that every day ends on a good note, no matter what craziness came before. It's just a really special practice. Recite a blessing before each meal. Almost 1 billion people on earth don't know for certain where their next meal will come from. If you are one of the lucky ones who has access to food, pause and express gratitude. So if you have bread at your meal, the proper blessing is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. And you can look that up. You can Google that, Jewish blessing for bread. Bread is considered a staple, and there's usually bread at every meal in some form. If you don't have bread at a meal, then you might say a different blessing. Let's say you're having just a salad with lettuce and tomatoes. Well, tomatoes grow on vines. We have blessings for food that grows in the ground. Barei peri ha'adama. We have blessings for things that grow on trees. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam barei peri ha'etz, like an apple, if you're eating an apple. And we have blessings of things that grow on vines, like grapes. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam barei peri ha'gafen. So depending on what you're eating and where it came from, that tells you what blessing to say. And you can explore that also. Recite Moda Ani upon waking up. We recited it already. This prayer thanks God for restoring our soul to us as we wake. It is a phenomenal way to start the day positively. Attend Friday evening services. From musical services with full bands to small minions relying on the power of the voice, there is really a Friday evening service for everybody. Find your niche and make it part of your weekly ritual. Here at CBI, we offer kind of a traditional Friday night service. We do offer a musical Friday night service. When the school's in session, sometimes our kids lead service. Our teens lead a monthly service. You can come listen to them pray, which is really cool. So there's lots of different ways to pray at CVI. Start wearing a kippah during prayer, study, and eating. Physically differentiate the sanctity of these moments by wearing a head covering. Kippot are traditional, but there is no reason why you can't rock a fedora while studying a piece of Talmud. So I have a kippah on right now because my teaching time for me is like prayer time. This is holy, sacred time for me. So I always wear a kippah when I teach as well as when I pray. So I encourage you, if I'm doing study, Jewish study, or if I'm writing a sermon, I sometimes put on a kippah because it puts me kind of in that right frame of mind. Learn and begin to use the Shehechianu blessing for new things. For the first cherries of summer, the first time you wear great new shoes, or upon reaching a special birthday, this is the all-purpose blessing for new things, the Shehechianu. Attend Shabbat morning services. Sing together, listen to your rabbi's inspiring words, schmooze with your community, and share a meal with friends. I think one of the things that I've missed more than anything during COVID is the kiddush lunch that happens here after Shabbat morning services. It's a free lunch. I mean, there's no charge for it. Everybody who's at services that day gets to come and have lunch in our social hall. You've just spent all morning praying together, experiencing maybe somebody's bar mitzvah or a baby naming or some great sermon or whatever it is. And then you sit down and have lunch together, the whole community. And I really have grown in this year and a half of absence to appreciate, and now I miss that. And I'm looking forward to, I don't know when we're going to start bringing those back. Very special. It's also very special on the rare occasions that we do Shabbat dinners. When I have my kids in school, we have class Shabbat dinners. You know, the 4th and 5th graders and their families will come, the kids will lead the service, and then we have a Shabbat dinner together. It's the best. Aside from the fact that we have really good food at CVI, which I've probably told you a few times, and I miss all that. It's just really great to break bread and to be together, just being together, right? It's really special. So after services, that's an opportunity. And even if you don't do it here, go have a Shabbat lunch or a Shabbat dinner with family and friends. Cook it yourself or do a potluck or whatever it is that you like to do with your friends. But just to have a dinner for no reason other than it's Friday night is a beautiful thing and a great way to end your week. Begin putting on talit and tefillin each morning. Get all wrapped up in your Judaism. Encircling yourself in a talit and binding tefillin onto your arm and forehead are physical ways of feeling close to God. And again, prayer is as much a physical experience as it is an emotional one. And there are all these ways to make it tactile for yourself. And take 15 minutes to say mincha in the afternoon. Pausing for afternoon prayer is a great way to overcome the 2 o'clock slump. Think about what your morning has held and what your evening could become. Sometimes I'm not very good at mincha. I'm usually so wrapped up in my work in the afternoon that I forget about it. And at 4 o'clock, my kids come for religious school, which is about the time I would say it. When I do think about it, I try and go right before 4 o'clock. I go down into the sanctuary and say a few words right before the kids come. It puts me in a good, it kind of separates the morning of just working in my office to when the kids are here. So, you know, we all use our prayers for different things. The prayers can be a transition from morning to evening, morning to afternoon. Prayer is a wake-up call. Prayer is a good night call. Prayer is all of those things. It defines our day in a way. So your reflection on chapter 6. So here's some things for you to think about. Some of the things that are challenging for me about Jewish prayer, I'm sure, and I would if I were you, put Hebrew. Hebrew is hard. I've spent many years studying Hebrew. I know a lot, but I don't know a lot. And when you do get it, when you know the prayers well enough that you can say them in Hebrew, it is really makes that participation level great. Some of the things that I appreciate about Jewish prayer. There's lots of things you could put here. I'd love to hear at least one thing from each of you about something you appreciate. Does anyone want to share?
What I like is the connection to the past and to the future, the generations to come. It just, it's such a, it just makes you feel so connected.
Absolutely. Anyone else? One of the things I appreciate about Jewish prayer is also that connection, but it's that kind of forced opportunity for me to sit quietly and commune with God. Because if without that kind of fixed time, like so many people, I get busy. You'd think that I would, just naturally do it, and many rabbis I know do. It takes a little bit of work for me. I have to work hard on that fixed time because I get so wrapped up in whatever I'm doing. But when I do it, I take advantage of that time to sit quietly. I'm one of those persons, my mind is always 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. So I have to really force myself. I'm horrible at meditation for that reason. But when I go to pray, I use the words to help me. So for me, that's one of the ways I use prayer to help me kind of stay focused, and to have a few spiritual moments with God. So those are some reflections for you to write down. Again, always there are some additional reading resources here for you. The best way to familiarize yourself with Jewish liturgy is to purchase a copy of the Siddur that your synagogue uses. And for they have Siddur Sim Shalom here, which we used to use. It's blue. It looks like that, but now we use the red book. So Siddur Lev Shalem, Mishkan Tefillah if you're Reformed, Kol HaNishma if you're Reconstructionist, and the Complete Art Scroll Siddur if you're Orthodox. It is fun to compare the different prayer books. They're all interesting for different reasons. Reuven Hammer's book, Entering Jewish Prayer, is a classic. Haim Donin's To Pray as a Jew is also a classic, or more Orthodox leaning. Abraham Joshua Heschel, Man's Quest for God. Abraham Joshua Heschel is one of the most inspiring rabbis of the 20th century, as I said, and he is someone it's common for people to bring books like Heschel to synagogue with them. So you have your prayer book open, but you might also, during the quiet prayer moments, read a passage from Heschel, because he puts you into that space and he talks about God in just a beautiful way. And sometimes he can help you connect. That addresses the question of what it really means to pray. So I highly recommend all of Heschel's writings, but he's really good for talking about what it means to pray and how to understand God in that context. And then Michael Cummins' book, Making Prayer Real. A variety of rabbis edited this volume about prayer and their different experiences with prayer. These websites, Siddur Audio, I need to check this one out. I've never been on that one. I have been on Virtual Cantor. Sometimes I just go to YouTube though. If I want to know how do you sing the Hashkivenu prayer, I'll just go to YouTube, and there's tons of recordings of modern cantors and Jewish performing artists singing various versions of Hashkivenu or Oseh Shalom or any of them. You can find them all on YouTube. It's so easy nowadays. But do check out these websites as well. Also, come to Shul. Come and sit with us and pray with us. And also now that COVID has happened, you can also go to the CBI YouTube channel and watch all of our archived services. Tune in just to practice prayer. That's a great way to do it, with Amy singing on most of them, and also with Carl Cedar and also with Hal Hurwitz. It's a great way to practice prayer. And now we're going to have all those recordings in perpetuity, so they will always be on our website. Questions?
Yes, real quick question here. So when you say Shema in the morning or at night, but on your own, do you say just a Shema, or do you say like the whole thing? I mean, just like the first sentence, or do you say like the entire thing, kind of like during prayer?
So by the entire thing, do you mean the V'ahavta?
Yeah, but I
That
have to
follows it?
all the way until the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
You do that.
So if I'm following the Siddur, then I would, right? Because it's all in here. I mean, I can, I don't have another page number off the top of my head, but wherever it is in here, oh, here it is. I just found it. Shabbat morning, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and then it goes right into V'ahavta. So if I'm praying from the prayer book, then I would definitely. If I'm praying on my own without a prayer book, just from memory, V'ahavta I do know by heart, so I might recite the V'ahavta, but I wouldn't necessarily recite Ahavat Olam or Ha'ahava Rabbah on my own. I might skip ahead to Mi Chamocha because I know that. So it just depends if I have a prayer book in front of me. It depends on how my morning's going, right? If I get up in the morning and I'm tired and I just say Moda Ani, that might be it for me that day. And I'll say Shema at night before I go to bed. So it just depends. I don't have a prescribed daily regimen when it comes to my prayer. I pray more with Kavanah than with Kepha, but I know that I always have the book when I want it and I can go through it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
If you're a traditionalist, then you would pray the whole thing. Any other questions? For those of you who are converting or thinking about converting, the rabbis of the Beit Din won't necessarily ask you about how often you go to shul or whether or not you pray 3 times a day, but they might ask you questions about how it feels when you pray, or what does the prayer experience feel like for you, or what is your favorite part about attending services, or what is your favorite service, or they might ask you kind of general questions like that. So think about that. It is prayer and connecting to God is a big part of being Jewish. Now, we all connect with God differently. Again, for me, and what brought me to this line of work and what brought me to this stage of my Judaism is partly the teaching, because in the study, that for me is prayer. Like, it just feels godly for me to do that. But you all are going to find your connecting points. For some of you, it will be fixed prayer, or Shabbat morning services, or Friday night services, or Kabbalat Shabbat, or Friday night dinner. I hope for all of you it is holidays, because those are joyous and fun, and you get to eat really great food and be with family and friends. But also think about high holy days. And by the way, I should say, we have a session coming up about high holidays, but there's a special Siddur for high holidays called a Machzor. That word means it's like cycles or circles. It's a special prayer book just for high holidays. The liturgy, the prayers that we say for high holidays are altogether different. Not completely, there's still Amidah and Baruch Hu, but there are changes in the liturgy that relate specifically to high holy days. And that liturgy and those prayers are very, very powerful. And those are days where we definitely are in shul every year. Those are fixed prayers. There is an opportunity and a time for quiet prayer, personal prayer throughout the service and throughout the days of the high holy days. But high holy days really are the most powerful in terms of prayer experience and prayer connecting, both communally and personally. So that might be the answer to the question for you. If a rabbi were to say to you, what is your most powerful prayer experience? It might be Kol Nidre on Erev Yom Kippur, right? Or the Rosh Hashanah prayers and bringing in the new year, or asking for forgiveness on Yom Kippur. Or it could be Shabbat. It could be any number of things. So those are some things to think about when it comes to prayer. There are numerous opportunities throughout the year to pray. There's holiday prayers and food prayers, and you can go to the beach and thank God for creating the ocean and its magnificence. You can go on a hike There are shuls that have regular Shabbat hikes because being in nature sometimes helps us connect with God in a different way, because that is literally being part of God's creation. I know that there are groups that do that regularly. I know, when, like I said, when my husband and I go hiking, it feels different than sitting in the synagogue. For me, sitting in the synagogue is about sitting with the community. It's about being part of a people. It's about being welcomed by those people, about contributing to those people. It's about celebrating the joyous events of those people. It's about mourning with those people and hope and having them celebrate and mourn with me when that happens. So that community connection is very, very important and special when it comes to synagogue prayer. There's an old saying, many Jews don't believe in God. And so sometimes people will say, well, why do they come to synagogue? And there's this old story about David and Shlomi, and they're both in shul, and someone says to David, why do you come to shul? And he says, I come to hear the rabbi's sermon. And they ask Shlomi why he comes to shul, and he says, I come to talk to David, right? Because being with each other and being part of the community is part of the power of Jewish prayer and Jewish prayer service. So I hope that you all take the time to come. We're open now on Shabbos morning. Again, get on our website and sign up and come. I'll be here this Saturday. If you come, I'll make sure you come over and say hi, and we'll see you. And we'll see you next Wednesday night when we have our next class.
Mhm.
All right. Any final questions or thoughts? All right, friends. Thank you so much. I
Thank
really
you, Rabbi
appreciate you.
Kruger.
spending
Thank you.
time. Thank you. Be well, everybody. Be well. Take care, and I will see you next week.
Okay, bye.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.